Combining innovation, design and technology, the Museum of the Future is a striking addition to the land of superlatives. The steel facade of the structure is carved in ornate calligraphy that was inspired by the words of Sheikh Mohammed, ruler of Dubai. Thank you so much, Shaun, for being with us today. It's amazing to be literally standing here inside the Museum of the Future. How do you feel now that it's come to fruition and you're standing inside?
It's an incredible experience, because the process of doing the international competition, winning it, then designing it from concept through scheme, detailed design, IFC, tendering it, then getting onto site, working with a contractor, taking it through through the stages, working up and into the steel structure and the facade systems. Because this building is so innovative and we're using technologies that almost have never been used in the building industry, right down from aviation technology and certain systems that we utilize to build this, there was a huge amount of interaction between the architects and engineers with the contractor and all the subcontractors during the process of it being built, which is unprecedented, because most buildings you supervise, but there's not that continuous design element, in particular on the facade. So going through all of that, and then as the building's coming to a near completion and snagging it and everything, is like a journey. It's like a process that you go through. But even up until a week before the museum was open, with some of my team, we walked around, we checked things, final snagging, as it were, some design improvements perhaps, and but that still was part of that very long process. But nothing prepared me really for the day I walked in here, which was after the opening day, and the lobby was absolutely full with people, with adults and children, smiling, taking pictures, enjoying the spaces, enjoying as a cultural building, as a unique piece for Dubai, and really enjoying the vibrancy of being able to go through all of these volumes and spaces of such a type of building.
A lot of the installations inside talk about being in 2070. What happens when we reach 2070? How does the design accommodate for flexibility?
Well, the museum is completely and utterly flexible, because it has absolutely no columns. We have spaces between 1,500 square meters per floor all the way to 2,000 square meters per floor, completely and utterly open. They are 9 meters floor to floor, so they are full exhibition and full exhibition loading. We have all the data, we have all the power requirements to ultimately handle anything that is going to go through the ages of the building, be it if it's exhibition space, which is enclosed, and it's a sort of an environment that is made in the dark with artificial lighting, as some of these floors are, and other ones where are open, and then you have exhibition within it, and you can see the calligraphy from the inside and allow light to come through. There's an enormous amount of flexibility. So it's been future-proofed that it can go through the ages and continue to evolve, because the exhibitions will change every sort of 1 or 2 or 3 years, depending on which floors, and our perception of what is coming in the future.
Talking about Museum of the Future is obviously the design of the building itself. How did the design come about, and what was the inspiration behind that?
So it was an international competition, and there was roughly 20 different participants. I was one of them. And the site of the whole of Emirates Towers was given. And the designer could come up with any area whatsoever. And to be honest, behind Emirates Towers, away from Sheikh Zayed Road, there's a very big plot where all the peacocks are, and a car park, which is an ideal place to have a museum in the normal conventional way that museums around the world have been built, which are maybe 2 stories or 3 stories. However, because this particular museum was so important to His Highness and so important to Dubai, as giving a sense of where Dubai is going and the UAE is going in terms of data and technology and innovation and discovery, and tying in with all of the partners, technological partners and everything, I felt that the site at the back was actually not appropriate, because people, be it residences and visitors coming to the site, they would hardly know. Maybe 2% of people would even know about the project. However, if it was on the front, on Sheikh Zayed Road, then 100% of all the residences and visitors would know about this museum. And that curiosity value of what the Museum of the Future would be in Dubai would be heightened. Secondly, that would also directly connect us to the metro. So we wanted to have an air-conditioned connection to the metro, because residences and visitors are using the metro, and tie in the podium of the Museum of the Future into the metro, and then reconnect the podium to Emirates Towers. So ultimately connecting Emirates Towers to the metro via the Museum of the Future, which is done on the other side of the spiral staircase over there. There is that connection, which actually integrates and contextualizes the project into the, let's call it the neighborhood. So the next thing was, I looked at the sites that on Emirates Towers that was left over, and there was a very small car park of 100 cars, surface parking with some really nice 30-year-old trees that show some greenery that were probably like 3 stories high or whatever, which were beautiful. However, if I took 30,000 square meters and I put it on the small site, I realized the building needed to be vertical. It's not a horizontal type of museum, it needed to go up. So then I started to design different ideas of vertical museums. So the building itself is only a portion of the overall mission of the Futures Foundation. And so now, if going back to the design of that, it's really to create a building that is using the highest technology of the building construction industry, whether it's throughout the ages of doing the pyramids or the Pantheon in Rome, or several other buildings throughout the ages. There's always been the sort of limits of the technology at that time. So it's really about using parametric, regenerative optimization in BIM, and creating a building shape that really encapsulated the future as that vessel that moves in visionary from Sheikh Mohammed's father to himself to his future generations. After the site analysis and the brief of what the building wanted to be, I come to the actual design of the building, where, as I took away the trees where the car park was, I wanted to create greenery in elevation. Because Dubai is quite flat, you don't see the beautiful landscaping on the roads when you're at the car and everything. So I wanted to replace that and use the car parking, the lobby, the restaurants, shops, MEP spaces, and the auditorium to create this mound, to let the earth come up and hold the museum also above the metro line, which is at plus 12 meters, and get the museum up at plus 16 meters. That would allow the building not to be cut by the metro line as well. And it also brings a park experience back to the city, where people can walk around into the park and reduce the heat island effect as well within the city, and cover that 20,000 square meters by this big hill. Of course, as I said before, there needed to be some verticality. So in the large part of the museum, where we have many of the exhibition floors, in that area, we have 7 levels. Each level is 9 meters floor to floor, which is like 3 floors in one. Mm-hmm. So in those levels, we will see the future of healthcare, transportation, aviation, future cities, future government cities, everything that we can imagine, maybe that we can perceive for maybe the next 2 years or maybe 3 years. However, the void in the middle of the museum is actually the most powerful point of the entire design, because it represents the unknown of the future. And people who seek the unknown invent new things and discover new things. And that ultimately will replenish the museum over time to keep it relevant. And that's the concept behind the shape of the museum future. But at the same time, I wanted to further contextualize the building as a cultural building. And that was to use the ancient art of calligraphy that I would embellish on the museum as the windows to the museum itself.
How did the collaboration with Mattar bin Lahej come about? And did the calligraphy later on change the design?
No. So from the very first sketch that I was doing at 1 o'clock in the morning while in the competition, on that sketch, I am drawing Arabic calligraphy on the sketch. And when we were doing the 3D renderings to submit for the competition, I used a placeholder of Arabic calligraphy. That didn't make any sense, but it was clear that it was Arabic calligraphy. We used it as a map and we put it on the building. So when I presented to His Highness and I was describing the concept, and at the end of the presentation, I asked him if he can write me these quotes of the future for the region and globally, which then I will use these quotes and I will place them on the museum to replace the placeholder calligraphy that I had on the building. So after that, we started designing the building, the structure of the building, and so on. And about 4 months later, we received from the Prime Minister's office the 8 quotes. That there was 8 of which then we selected 3 that fitted on, because we didn't know the length of the quotes or anything. But during the concept design as well, I wanted to ensure that the calligraphy that we place on the building is of the highest order in terms of its true nature to its artistic elements. For example, on the Thuluth, there are several rules of whether you can do like the verticals or the lower or upper in sections of 6, and what you can do. There's limits to what you can do, and there's freedom of what you could do. It took probably about a month and a half of searching. We wanted to really find somebody who was talented in the UAE or even in Dubai that was a calligrapher. And after some time, actually, I discovered Mattar bin Lahej. And I called him up and I said, we would like you to be involved in this project to do the calligraphy and authenticate it, and then we will collaborate in that way. So how we did that was we got the quotes that we had selected and we met, and I showed him the building and explained to him what we want. And then he painted actually the calligraphy in a painting, each of the sections. And then when we received these, we digitized them. So we had to trace the edges. And then in Rhino, we had to start to move these onto the building, which was an incredibly difficult task because the building is parametrically optimized and it's all scripted. And then which is organic ultimately, and then the calligraphy itself was organic. So you're taking 2 organic elements and you're trying to place them together. And this took about 3 or 4 months worth of research, because we couldn't extrude the calligraphy and then cut the surface because it would distort. We needed it to wrap on the edges, even the tight edges, as if it's like skin. So ultimately we used movie software where they do like dinosaurs and they put textures or like fur or whatever, and we treated the calligraphy like that it would like stick onto the surface and we could move it over the surface. But we had to trick the software because this was a pure torus. It was wanting to behave in a certain way which we didn't want to behave, to put calligraphy on, to keep it straight. So we cut the torus in pieces that it didn't recognize it was a torus, and then we started to place the calligraphy and put everything back together again. And that allowed us to cut the calligraphy on the surface. So while we were doing this process, we would then do it to a certain extent. Then we would meet Mattar and we would show the elevation, and then he would check that that we didn't distort anything unnecessarily, because this is being a public building. People would, start to refer to it, and we needed to make sure that it was perfect. Then the second big challenge came, is that the steel diagrid, as you saw when the building was being built and the cladding, before the cladding came on, it has these nodes where 6 elements come together. So we had the calligraphy on there, and then the nodes, the steel structure was also parametrically optimized with growth algorithms, almost like AI, to reduce the number of nodes. But as soon as all the nodes were put in place, we then checked, and we didn't want to have the calligraphy as a window with a node right in the middle. We didn't mind a diagram going through, but so we spent another 4 months moving the calligraphy by 300 millimeters, 500 millimeters. We couldn't move the nodes. So by moving one letter, everything moves, and it adjusts everything. So it took one person 4 months to do that. So that was a tremendous task. Eventually, when we got into construction, there was all the joints in place. And sometimes the contractor, he came to us and he said, he doesn't want the glass to be a little bit onto one and not the other. So there was another level of shifting, that we would have huge drawings on the walls. And every Thursday then afternoon, I would go to the factory and we would literally, they would have the calligraphy of where we had it and in another color where they proposed it. And then we would debate whether that was allowed or not. So eventually to get this on the building was a tremendous challenge, but ultimately worth it because it holds such a strong signature to Dubai.
And so just to get an estimate, how many months did it take for just the calligraphy to get right?
The design of, well, first of all, to find a calligrapher took about 1 to 1.5 months. And then when we made the digitization and then placed it on, took us 3.5 months to get it onto the building and spread it around. It was a trial and error, because we wanted the spaces of the calligraphy to be a minimum of, say, 1 meter to 1.1 meters wide, that people could step into the windows, because the facade system is 1.3 meters deep. And if the calligraphy was scaled down, then it wouldn't be wide enough and comfortable enough that 1 or 2 people can stand inside of a window in the depth of the actual facade system and look out the window. We wanted to achieve that. So the trial and error nature of it was actually increasing the size to make sure that every stroke was wide enough to achieve that. And at the same time, moving the calligraphy around the building and optimizing it that we could fill the whole building. So that took about 4.5 months. When we eventually got the nodes, another 3 months. So it was very interesting. And near the very end of detail design, Bureau Happel further optimized the steel structure, which meant that we lost some of the nodes, but at the same time we had to, many of the nodes came back into the calligraphy, so we had to do the exercise again, but it was a bit quicker.
Oh, wow. So rough estimate is like 1.5 years just on the calligraphy.
Maybe a year.
At any point in construction, did the design change again?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, from our design and the placement to avoid the nodes, and when we went out to tender with that, there were only minor adjustments of where the calligraphy was, of maybe a few hundred millimeters here or there to avoid a joint. So if it went over the joint by, say, 400 or 500 millimeters, then the glass element would be big enough that it could be on a separate panel. But if it was only 50 millimeters or 100 millimeters, then it was too small. So then, one by one, we would work with the cladding subcontractor with these, 2 meters by 1.5 meter drawings and tweaking it based on where the joints were, because they determined the size of the joints based on their manufacturing process.
And now, obviously, we need to talk about the elephant in the picture, the helix staircase. Talk to me about, 1, the design of it, and 2, how did this whole thing happen seamlessly without breaking the calligraphy?
There are several interesting elements throughout the museum in terms of the spaces and when you move through them. Number 1, as I said before, there's no columns in the entire building. All the structure is in the skin, and all the floors are supported on the skin structure, on the facade system, or within the facade system, the steel diagrid. So further than that, the core itself, we have one of the biggest elevators in the Middle East here, if not the world, which can take about 120 people. It's 4 meters high, it's like 6-7 meters deep, 4 meters wide. So that goes up and down the core, plus the 3 bullet elevators that take about 35 people each, that also is running and assists in the building. that goes all the way up the entire atrium of the space, which is also quite nice to experience as you're moving through the space or photographing it or whatever. There is 2 staircases. We wanted people to walk. We wanted to encourage people to walk in the museum as well and to move from one floor to the next. So ultimately, the elevators pull people up to the top of the building. But in the same way, like in the Guggenheim Museum, you got the ramp, but you also got the small spiral staircase through the top of the building all the way down the 7 levels. So kind of 7 times 9 meters. We have this corkscrew staircase that runs through the atrium. And if you watch people the way they're using the museum, they're actually leaving a floor and they're walking down that spiral staircase. Although it's 9 meters, it's quite a distance, but they're enjoying the space around and the experience going down that spiral staircase. So that takes you from level 7 all the way down to level 1, which is on the top of the podium. Then from level 1, to get them back into the lobby, we have what you're seeing over here is a double helix staircase. There's actually 2 staircases together, but they don't touch. So the one staircase is unticketed. In other words, you can walk from there going up to the bridge on the opposite side, and you can go to Emirates Towers or the Metro, or you can come around to the auditorium, which we're, passing where we are now. Or if you take the other one where the turnstiles are, or if you come down it, that one links all the way up to the first level, which is essentially 4 stories high. And it's the highest double helix staircase in the world. So the steel inside of that staircase is so large that actually the only people who could bend the steel to create that staircase were the steel fabricators that make the nose cone of submarines. So that's how we actually made it. Then it came to the UAE and then we cladded it and everything. So it's very interesting. Well, there's a lot of big firsts. I mean, even the revolving doors on the lobby levels, those are also the largest volumetric revolving doors with glass roofs, so they only have a motor in the bottom. And it was continuous. We just continuously looked at things we can do that was innovative and push technology to where we are today.
Thank you so much for giving us your time and literally explaining the whole breadth of and scope of design. It's been amazing talking to you.
You're welcome.
And congratulations again, because this is one for the books.
This one's for the books, yeah.